Podcasts. One of the reasons why I really love podcasts is because they are so intimate. If you're into your podcasts, you'll know what I'm talking about. You jump in your car or you're going for a walk, you put your earbuds in, and then suddenly you're in the company of somebody else. They're having a conversation. You're sitting in on that conversation, and you feel like you really get to know that person. One of those people that I have felt that I have got to know, even though we've barely ever connected in the real world, is my guest today. He is an author. He is a professional investor. He is a SaaS entrepreneur. He's host of the outstandingly popular Top 25 business podcast, Build Your Network. His name is Travis Chappell. And how are you doing, my friend?
What's up, brother? Thanks so much for having me on the show.
Now, I'm going to kick things off with a question that I've pinched from a really good podcaster. He always seems to ask this question almost at the beginning of all his interviews. He says, I'd really like to know what you were like as a child. Do you know who says that?
Sounds familiar. Sounds familiar. Yeah.
I'd like to know what Travis Chappell wanted to do when he was a 7-year-old kid.
So I grew up in a really tight-knit religious bubble community. I like the best way I can explain it to people is I call it a bubble all the time, is I don't think it was necessarily a cult, but I do think that it had some cult-like tendencies. So I call it a bubble because to give you some context, we started going to the church when I was 3. They have a K through 12 school on the same campus. So kindergarten all the way through senior year of high school. And they have a college on the same campus, 4-year ministerial only college. And I went to kindergarten all the way through senior year of college on the same campus that I went to church on every weekend from my entire childhood.
Wow.
So basically my whole life was lived on that campus until I was, 21 years old. And so the only real option they present to you growing up there is the ministry option. So, kind of growing up at that school, their funnel, now looking back on it, I can clearly see it as a funnel, is, bring members into the church, get them to put their kids in the school, and then bring those kids that graduate from the school into the college. And so we didn't really have career counselors or anybody that was just like, hey, what do you want to do when you grow up type of a thing. It was basically a lot of preaching and teaching around ministry and how much of a need there is for worldwide ministering and stuff like that. And so basically the options that we had as presented to us by our authority growing up was ministry or not ministry, which one? And if your answer was not ministry, then they would just be like, all right, good luck. There was nothing beyond that. There was no like, okay, so what do you want to do? Oh, you want to be an engineer? Well, you're probably going to need these types of grades and you're probably going to want to apply for these universities so that you can work at these types of firms and these types of jobs. Like none of that existed. So basically our class was separated into the people who were going to the college for ministry and the people who like got a trade job out of high school or went to the local junior college or went to the military. Like that was basically it.
And they separated.
So I was in, yeah, exactly. Yeah, more or less. So I was in, what's that?
You're in the non-group. It's like, if you were 7 and you said, I want to be the Pope when I grow up, you're in that group. And if you say, maybe not for me, you're in the other one.
Correct. Yep, exactly. And so I was in the ministry group. And which is why I went to the college that was on the same campus. Because, once you said that you're in ministry, they didn't really present a bunch of other colleges that were potential seminaries for you to go to. It was just, next step is there's no better college to go to than the one that we have here. So here's an application for our college, And so that's where I ended up. And I ended up in Bible college, got my degree in Bible and in church ministries. So yeah, from the time that I was a pretty young kid, I like dedicated my life to ministry when I was like 11 or 12 years old. And that was the only path that I was on.
I was in a slightly different bubble. I went to this alternative school where we all grew our hair long and had earrings and called our teachers by their first names, which in Australia is very, very weird. What I do find,
I would say that's not super normal anywhere.
And what I've found as I've got older is that most of the entrepreneurially focused people that I meet did come from quite unusual upbringings. Now, I asked you that question because Travis is an amazing podcaster and he always begins his almost always begins his interviews asking that question. And it's a wonderful question to ask because already, and I don't want to sound cynical, but I feel like I know Travis a lot better and I have a better understanding of where he's coming from, which ties back to my point at the very beginning about podcasts being such an intimate forum. I'd really like to know then, how did you go from that spot of being the next Pope, I don't know where you were heading, to being this worldwide famous podcaster?
So when I was done with college and I realized that I didn't want to be in ministry, I was kind of, lost. I didn't really know what I was going to do. I just graduated college with a degree that I wasn't going to use, and it was unaccredited anyway. So it's not like I'd be able to go get a regular job with it, regardless of even if somebody looked at Bible and church ministries as an attractive studying field, it was unaccredited. You know what I mean? So at that point, I was just like, man, I don't know what to do. So I did the only thing that I had experience in, which was door-to-door sales, because that's what I had done in college to make extra money during.
Were you selling
school.
Bibles?
No, actually. But I mean, kind of growing up, we kind of did that. We had every Saturday, we had what we called soul winning, which was basically knocking on doors, handing out tracts and inviting people to come to church, from the time that I was like 9. So kind of used to do that. Yes.
There's a lot of the sales literature is written by people who, based on practices where people cut their teeth selling Bibles door to door. A lot of the things that we learn now came from that background. Yeah,
definitely. And I mean, that's a tough sell. You know what I mean? So it preps you when you're going door to door selling religion. Selling a consumer product is a much easier thing to talk about. So I just kind of fell into door to door because that was the only thing, like I said, that I had any experience in. And I figured, this door to door thing, I can work 20, 25 hours a week, because we'd only work the hours that people were home. I didn't do a summer program. The summer program guys, they'll work 4 months out of the year, but they'll work 12-hour days on those 4 months. We were a year-round operation. So we would work when people were home. And so we'd work from, 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. or 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. or something like that. And so I'd work 20, 25 hours a week, and it was 100% commission, but I knew that there was potential there. And I figured that was a better opportunity than just going and getting some lousy desk job for $30K a year to start working my way up the corporate ladder. I figured, this sales thing is a lot faster path to being able to make some decent money right now. And so jumped into that. First year that I did it full time, I cracked 6 figures for the first time ever in knocking door to door, selling alarm systems. But the problem was at the end of the year that I didn't feel like it was something that I wanted to keep doing. I had a good time. It was a fun run, and I liked the people that I worked with and made some decent money. But when I looked at 33-year-old Travis, I didn't like the picture of knocking on doors anymore. And not even to throw shade at that industry, because I have a ton of friends who make a great living going door to door and have complete autonomy over their schedules, and they have freedom and they travel, and it just wasn't for me. So at that point, now I was even more lost than I was before, because not only am I not doing the thing that I have a degree for, but now I'm not doing the thing that I know how to do. You know what I mean? So now I have.
It's a tough thing when you start to earn money early, because.
Oh yeah, right. Where do you go?
Similar thing, and I did the same thing. I saw myself at 33, so I was like 25, and I saw myself at 45. And I was working in the PR industry. Once again, like Travis said, not to shit on anyone in the PR industry. It's a great industry, but I could see myself going down a path that I didn't want. And it's really, really tough when you're making money to say, no, I'm going to take a step back. You have to, it's actually quite wise. It actually shows a degree of wisdom. So that's great. What happened next?
Yeah. So that was really kind of one of the low points for me, because, you go from making 6 figures to not working because you don't know what to do. It starts taking hits in your confidence and your mental health and all those types of things. And I used it as kind of a time to just kind of focus on me for a little bit, because obviously growing up the way that I grew up, I was nothing but a compilation of all the experiences, thoughts, beliefs that everybody preached at me from the time that I was 3 till the time that I was 22. So at 23, 24, I was really just like, who am I? What am I supposed to do? What am I here for? The difference was that we had bought a house, our second house. And so I had a mortgage to pay, and I was married. I got married right before I graduated college. So I didn't have the luxury of just, sleeping on my parents' couch until I figured something out or something. It was like, no, I have bills to pay. Like, I can't just sit around and do nothing all day, every day. So my wife went back to work, and we cashed in on a real estate deal that we were in. And I basically took like 6-8 months off trying to figure out what I was going to do. I got my health back in order because that year when I was selling door to door, I gained a bunch of weight and I wasn't, keeping track of my physical health. And so I started going back to the gym and started getting control of those things. And for the first time in my life, I dove into personal development, really because it was a back against the wall type of a moment. I didn't know what to do, where to go, what I was going to do with my life. And I was just kind of searching for how I was going to figure it out. And so started reading some books, listening to some audiobooks, listening to some old school like Jim Rohn, trainings, and started to first time ever listen to podcasts. And that's when I came across this podcast from John Lee Dumas called Entrepreneur on Fire. It's talked about how you can start a podcast and blah, blah, blah. And I go and look at his income reports and I was like, whoa, this dude's making this much money from a podcast. How is that possible? Got me a little bit interested. And then, a few months later, I decided, hey, let's go ahead and give this thing a shot. And so started into podcasting right around that time.
I heard John Lee Dumas in Australia at the We Are podcast. Ronsley Vaz does a conference on podcasting every year. But what I really found fascinating about that podcast, Entrepreneur on Fire, is exactly what you said. He gave up all the information on how much money he was making and how it was structured and how he was doing it. It was one of those rare examples of radical transparency where the business just goes, here's how it's working out for me. And you could look at it, and he was releasing his data. Now, we are talking about podcasts, and I've recently started a podcast. I've started podcasts 3 times now. And I'm happy to run through all my mistakes, and you can tell me what I did wrong. But a podcast, I believe, as I said earlier, is just one of those fantastic platforms that allows you to step into somebody's, into their world. You're stepping into their world. It feels like they're in part of your world. Getting started. It's been a bunch of years now. Was it 2-3 years? How many years has it been now since you started?
So I started my show in August of 2017. Oh, so I met you. Yeah, I met you at We Are Podcast.
And so we met on the Gold Coast of Australia. Was it the Gold Coast or Brisbane? I can't remember.
Brisbane.
It was in Queensland. Yeah. And had you had your first episode then? Had you done your first episode?
Yes. So I was probably like 2 months in at that. I think that was October. I started in August. So 2 months in at that point.
I remember I think we whiteboarded a product ecosystem in a side room or something like that. And I didn't know you and you didn't know me. And you're a guy who's just got a podcast. I'm some crazy Australian that you've never heard of ever before. and we just had a conversation. But since then, it's obviously, it's gone crazy and you've achieved so much wonderful stuff. But I want to go back to that time where you're about to start. And I'm sure you spent a lot of time recollecting and thinking back, what would I do differently? What did I do right? What are some of the things that you would advise someone who is thinking of doing a podcast? What are the things the mistakes that you made, the things you do?
The number one mistake that I made was waiting too long to start it. I knew that I wanted to launch a show in September of 2016. And I did not launch it until August of 2017. And for that particular time frame, it was even more detrimental than it would be now, I think, because there's probably podcasts probably doubled in that year. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
From 16 to 17, it was really starting to gain popularity. So by the time I launched my show, there was almost 500,000 podcasts that were out there, when I probably could have started with more like 250,000 podcasts, which probably would have given me a little bit more organic traffic and listeners. So there's more from that, audience growth and listener side, but also just everything that I'm doing right now would have been sooner if I would have just launched and stopped putting that much thought into it and just would have just taken the first step and just put the stuff out there, no matter what it is and when you're doing it and what it sounds like and all that kind of stuff. And I'm a big proponent of launching correctly. And I'm not suggesting to just put whatever out there and, throw it against the wall, hope it sticks type of a deal. But I am saying that there's a big difference between planning properly and procrastinating because you're afraid of what people are going to think about the show that you try to release. There's a big difference between those two things. And I was doing more of the latter rather than the former, which was a big problem to me. So that's really the biggest mistake, because in that mistake is all the other mistakes. You know what I mean? Like if you just start, you start learning. And you start learning quickly what you're doing incorrectly or what you're doing correctly, because you're getting real-time feedback and data that's telling you the answer to a lot of the questions that you're sitting there pontificating about on a daily basis, and just guessing what's going to happen. You don't know. Just take some action and clarity will start to come to you, you know?
What I see is a lot of people, they make a commitment to gathering information. They think that they're making a commitment to their podcast, but they're making a commitment to gathering information. They're not making a commitment to action. And I think that when you make that commitment to action, such as I'm going to record my first interview and I'm going to put it up, within a fortnight or within a week, and just when you do that, you start to make mistakes. So for example, right now, today, I know that I've already made 2 mistakes, right? And already, like one, just then my computer went bing because somebody sent me a message on Facebook, right? I should have turned that off, right? Did you hear me go bing? A little bit earlier, I quickly realized that my Dropbox account was about to connect with my computer and start uploading a document, which would have sucked on the bandwidth. And then suddenly, Travis, and you probably heard me clicking, right? You heard me clicking.
Yeah.
We're going to be making mistakes all the time. I see people making a commitment to information gathering, not a commitment to action. But however, I want to help those people who are making a commitment to information gathering. And the question that they always ask, and I've seen this at every Ronsley Vass conference ever, is what technology should I be using?
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because we just launched a new funnel about this recently to kind of combat that a little bit, because that's the question that I get all the time too, is, hey, what equipment should I get? What equipment should I get? And my answer is always, it doesn't matter. Your equipment is inconsequential to the success of the show. As long as you have something that's a little bit better than just like, if you're going to start a podcast, you should probably have some sort of an external mic, but it's $50 on Amazon. Buy a $50 external USB mic. You don't need a mixer. You don't need a bunch of lighting and a fancy background and $2,000 worth of equipment. The first 400 episodes of my show were done on a $60 USB mic, and my laptop, and that was
no vision. Like no cameras.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yep. So equipment is inconsequential. So we actually just launched a funnel for our $99 launch course, where we give away a mic set for free if you buy the launch course, because I just got sick of answering the question, and it would cause people to procrastinate on jumping into our launch programs. Cause like, well, I don't know what equipment to buy. And it's like, oh my gosh, it's not that big of a deal. You need to focus on your content and your
Amazon?
Strategy.
Go there.
Yeah. Right.
Look at some reviews.
Right. So we literally just sourced our own microphone and we just ship it to people who buy our launch course and just say, look, the course is what matters. The content, the information that you're giving away in your podcast, that's what matters. You know what I mean? The equipment's inconsequential. And I see people spend too much money on it all the time. And then, bro, so we have this academy, right, that helps entrepreneurs learn how to build profitable podcasts. And we had this one lady recently that we jumped on a coaching call. Anybody that joins gets a free coaching call with me. And so we jumped on our coaching call and we're talking through it. And she was talking about the academy and said it was too much money for her at the time. And so she wasn't able to purchase it. And I think she was in maybe one of our mastermind groups or something. And the academy's $997 or 3 payments of $397. And she was trying to tell me that even the $397 payment plan was too much, right? Like 5 minutes after she tells me that $397 is too much to learn the information about how to do it the right way, she tells me that her new iMac is on its way so that she can start recording her episodes on her podcast. And I was like, what? You just told me that $397 for the information was too much, but you just spent $1,500 to $2,000 on a new iMac to help you record your episodes. You could have recorded that into like a $400 Asus little cheap laptop thing with a USB directly into your microphone, and then actually bought something that was going to help you make money on your show, like the information that's inside of this training. You know what I mean? Like, it was just it was a real-time example of somebody that was focusing so much on the wrong things. And I bet you anything, man, like, and I'm not one of those people that like swears by my course and says that you won't be successful unless you buy my stuff. I do not believe that in the least. But all I'm saying is the type of person that prioritizes those decisions over decisions to learn how to do it properly is the type of person that's going to fast forward in 2 years from now and still not have a podcast out because all they did was use their new iMac for playing chess or whatever.
We use an expression, micro gambles. So, and, an example of micro gamble is we wanted to shoot videos. So I said, hey, it'd be great if we have a green screen. So we spent, 2-3 days researching green screens. And eventually we discovered that the best option was around $1,800, right? For what we wanted. Anyway, but this was going on and on and on. Did we want to invest that money? Did we not want to invest that money? And I ended up going to the local, I don't know what you'd call it, a haberdashery, a linen shop, and I bought 2 meters of green fabric, and it was $6 a meter. And I hung it up on hooks on the corner of my room and my office. It was a micro gamble. And then I stood in front of it and I had a green screen. The reason why I'm talking about that is that we come up with all these reasons why we can't do the video. I wanted to shoot a demo video and I couldn't shoot the demo video because I wanted to have a green screen. We spent days and days looking at that and I ended up spending $12 on two bits of fabric. The most important thing is the action that we are going to take. So what was stopping you? That 1 year when you didn't do it, what was going through your head that was stopping you from doing it?
Imposter syndrome, probably for the most part. Just, if I put all this effort,
to offer.
Yeah, sure. It's a podcast is a very public way to pursue your goal. You know what I mean? Like if you start a side business or a side hustle or something, nobody really has to know that it exists in order for you to be able to start seeing some traction. And then you can kind of announce it to the world after you've had some traction and you have a little bit of, a track record and you have a little bit more confidence behind what you have to offer to the world. But with a podcast, I mean, it's based on acceptance from people. That's what makes it successful. So when you're starting that, you're putting yourself out there in a very public way. And I knew that I had a bunch of kind of not necessarily haters, but people in my past from the world that I left that I knew that they were already talking crap about the way that I decided to live my life. And I was just like, man, I don't want to pour more fuel on their fire and give them more opportunities to talk about what a failure I am now that I decided to not go down this other path. And so I let a lot of those things, stop me and get in my head around it. And kind of did that, information overload thing where I was so worried about doing it, the right way, where I just kept putting off the launch, and we put it off for another month, and we put it off for another 2 months, and then we put it off for another 3 months. And then eventually ended up getting it to where, it was almost a full year later.
Well, what was the tipping point? I mean, obviously something happened, or was it just the pain of not doing it had just got to such a point where it had to happen?
When you pay attention. And I figured that would be the type of boat that I was in. So I hired a coach and I paid for a mastermind at John Lee Dumas's house in Puerto Rico. And at that point, now I'm like, then I paid for a website, and then I paid for, my microphone. So now all of a sudden, if you combine my coaching, the mastermind, my website, all those things, I was like 15K in on this side project thing. So at that point it was like, well, I better figure this out or I just wasted $15,000. And at the time, that wasn't an amount of money that I could just waste, at any point. There's not an amount of money that I want to waste. Yeah. So So yeah, for me, it was a when you pay attention thing. I was just like, I'm going all in, and I knew that the act of physically investing would keep me accountable to taking the action necessary to make that money back.
So let's get a little bit tactical, because then you've got your first year and you've had to learn a whole bunch of stuff. I'd love to hear about some of the strategies that you use to grow it, and then I want to hear about the strategies that you've been using to get guests. And of course, that is going to allow us to talk about something pretty cool that's going on in your world. But this first year and growth, did you get much growth in the first year, or was that Travis is shaking his head? If you're listening to this, he's shaking his head. No. So the first year was a stinker, was it? Tell me how it went, and help our listeners and participants figure out what they need to do.
Yeah, I always thought that if I went out and got really good guests and they shared my content, it would be like one of those hitting the lottery moments where all of a sudden just like everything changes and I'm really well known and people download my podcast and I'm making a lot of money. And there were a couple of events that I thought would do that. Like the first thing was getting on the top charts during my launch week. You know, I was like, man, if I hit the top charts, like we're going to get a bunch of organic traffic because everybody's going to be looking at it and finding new podcasts. We're going to get some of that. We hit the top charts. We hit, I think, all of business top charts, like top 200 in all of business. Like we're like number 175 in all business, and then like number 20 something in our category, and basically got zero traffic from that. And so that was like a really discouraging moment. And then it was like, all right, well, let's keep going. Let's keep getting better guests. And so we started focusing on getting better guests. And then it was never the type of growth that I thought was going to happen. It was always incremental. It was never exponential. And so when I looked back after a year, and keep in mind, bro, I was doing 3 interviews a week when I first started my show, releasing 3 interviews a week, not just 3 episodes where I could record and batch, 12 of them in an hour because they're only 5-minute solo shows. Like, 3 30-minute interviews every single week. And that was in addition to what I was doing full time, which was still in the door-to-door industry because that was the best way I knew how to make money. So I was doing my full-time thing and doing this on the side, and I still wasn't getting any traction or making much money from it. So the first year was super discouraging. Probably month 14, month 15 was just tough, man. Cause I was just like, when is this going to pay off? I feel like I'm putting in all this work and nothing's really happening, And so, yeah, that first year was pretty dead, pretty discouraging. But at the beginning, I had already committed to myself that I was going to give it 2 years before I, took my foot off the gas pedal, before I reevaluated what the next step was going to be. I was going to give it 24 months of putting out 3 episodes a week. And if I get to the end of 24 months and nothing's happened, and it's a complete and utter waste of my time, at that point, I can quit, or I can adjust, or I can move down to 1 a week, or I can do something different, but I'm going to give it 2 years regardless. And so really that commitment's probably the only thing that kept me going, because, if I would have just been caught up in my numbers and stuff like that, I probably wouldn't have kept going past that first year.
Because there are going to be 2 types of people listening right now. There's the type of person that's thinking, I want to create a podcast so that I can make it my living and I can be like Travis. And that person's probably feeling a little bit discouraged at this moment because it takes time. And there might be things that you can suggest that would accelerate the process. The other type of listener, and I think that this is going to be the vast majority, given the topic of the conversation, B2B, sales and marketing, will be the business owner or the business operator. And they, guys and gals, you will probably be doing this for a different reason. And that's because you don't need to be in the top 25. And I'm sure that you've got people that work through your training, your school, and they're not doing it because they want to be the next Travis Chappell. They're doing it for other reasons. Can you talk a little bit about that?
100%, man. That's really our MO in our academy, and the things that we teach is we help entrepreneurs build profitable podcasts. For 90% of them, that has nothing to do with audience growth. Almost zero to do with audience growth, actually. We actually help some of our people monetize their shows before they even launch. We use it as a guest-facing monetization strategy where you build a strategic list of dream guests for your show that are built on your ideal client profiles. And then you go out and you interview as many of those people as you possibly can. And even if if you're only releasing one a week, don't limit yourself to 4 a month. Go interview 34 people next month if they all fit your ideal client profiles. Especially if you're in B2B and you're selling something that's a higher ticket product or service that you make a larger, price point on a single transaction. There's just so few transactions that need to happen in order for it to be worth all of your time that you put into it. Your goal in that context is what I call the business developer monetization archetype. Like your goal is to become the king of business development or queen of business development in your space, where you're the one that's constantly reaching out to people that are potential clients and interviewing them for your show. And the reason that we suggest podcast interviews as the way to get a hold of those people is that it's the easiest foot in the door. You talk to a lot of people and they're great at earning business, but they're not great at cultivating the original connection. You know what I mean? And that's half the battle, is getting your foot in the door. And you're getting your foot in the door to do a demo or getting your foot in the door to, jump on a sales call. It's just highly unlikely that you're going to get a fair percentage of your ideal clients to jump on that sales call or to watch a demo of your product or service. But if you are reaching out to highlight them on your podcast because you think they're badass and they're awesome at what they do and you want to highlight them to your community, your response rate on that is going to be significantly higher, especially if you're operating in an industry that doesn't require, like in my industry, I have to deal with influencers and, prima donnas and celebrities and stuff like that. And they're always putting stuff off anyway. But if you're in a regular B2B type business and you're just trying to connect with business owners, they're not like that. If you reach out and be genuine and honest, you don't have to be, a brown noser, but genuine and honest with a compliment about something that they're working on that you respect the hell out of. And then you can use your podcast as a way to generate a conversation where you can build rapport with that person for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour on a conversation, just like the one you and I are having right now. Then that is an activity that will lead to business growth, sales, marketing, and all of the above, because you don't have to just build your guest list in a way that is maybe helping you build relationships with your ideal client. You could build your guest list in a way that helps you build relationships with your ideal business partners, with your best referral partners, like people that can send you, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions of dollars in business on an annual basis because you got to know the person that runs that business on a call just like this one and built rapport with that person, continued a relationship, and then 14 months later, there's an opportunity for you guys to get together on something and they start sending you a bunch of people. Like that's my whole point with having a podcast and making it profitable for an entrepreneur, is using it in a way to help you build relationships on purpose with the people that you're most likely to do business with at this point or at some point in the next 5 years.
There are two elements of this that are insanely valuable. One is that Travis was talking about how it took him 2 years to get traction. Whenever we embark on any new way of marketing, it's not something that you do once and there's suddenly, I don't know, rainbows and sparklies fall from the roof and everybody cheers. It's all about routine. So that's the first bit. The second bit here is that we're not talking about trying to book calls with Tony Robbins and Lady Gaga. We're talking about a consistent way to bring new opportunities into your business while also raising your profile, while also you can repurpose the content to use it in all sorts of different ways as well too. Now, I did say before I would ask about accelerators, and I am sure that bringing on a really interesting guest is going to be one way of accelerating it. Now, yes, there is a lot of fear in association with getting guests on the show. I would like to hear some of your tips about how to get good guests, but I also in particular want to hear about your SaaS venture, which has me really excited. So guests, how do we get them?
Yeah, sure. And to your point, it is a huge part of the process. And one thing that we try to help people with is having a balance of your ideal clients and ideal business partners that you're bringing on the show. And then also having 10 to 20% of your guest spots open for the credibility authority drivers. So in the B2B space, James, this is your space. Name a couple of like really well-known people in the B2B space.
Well, for this summit, I'm interviewing Taki Moore later today. Ryan
Okay.
Levesque the other day.
Okay, so let's take those two. Right?
Travis Chappell. Have you heard of him? It's amazing.
If you're in the B2B space, right, and you follow all Talking More stuff, and you've read Ask from Ryan Levesque and all these things, and somebody in your space you've never heard of before in your life, they reach out to you and they go, "Hey, James, we'd love to have you come on our podcast that interviews B2B experts, because, that's what we do for a living, is we help B2B experts." And then you go look at their guest lineup, or they send it in their reach out and they say, "Look, we've had guests like Taki Moore and Ryan Levesque on." Like, how much more excited are you as the guest to jump on that host's show with the knowledge that you're being put in the same conversation with all of those industry legends? That's the power of having quality guests on your show. Even if you're still, again, not going after the audience downloads, even if you're only using this as a pure business development play, you have to think about the authority and the credibility that those other names give you, assuming that the person that you're reaching out to that could potentially be an ideal client of yours has no idea who you are and has never heard of you in their life. So that credibility, that authority that you get, it's the law of association, man. It's a psychological principle. We can't help it. It's programmed into our subconscious. That's why the endorsement industry is a, hundreds of billions of dollars a year business. It's a hundreds of billions of dollars a year industry, because brands understand that like and trust this person or this celebrity, right? So they get that person to talk about their product because they just immediately associated trust with their product. A product that you've never tried before, that you've never heard of. All of a sudden you see, LeBron James holding it, and now you've immediately assigned the level of trust that you have in LeBron that's been built over 20 years. You've just assigned that to that product without ever hearing about it in your
toothbrush.
Exactly. And that's the whole game of building that credibility and that authority. And that's the exact thing that happens when you bring the good guests onto your show.
We have some training in the B2B school called the 12 Principles of Persuasion and Influence. And number 4 is authority. And there's only a small number of ways to get authority. One is to get a lot of education, get some letters next to your name. Another one is actually the clothes that you wear. It's real. I mean, it's why you see actors wearing lab coats selling conditioner and shampoo.
Yeah.
Right. Another one is leveraging or borrowing the authority of other people, which is what we're talking about. The last way and the best way to get authority is to actually help people in advance, which is another reason why podcasts are so good. When you listen to Travis and you learn something from him, his authority goes up, even without all those other pieces. Now, in the limited amount of time that we still have together, I want to hear about your new technology business, Guestio. Can you give us, absolute, I want to hear everything about it. Gratuitous invitation to talk about a product that I think is amazing.
I appreciate it, man. And it's something that we put a lot of effort and work into. Basically what happened was we started becoming well-known for the people that we're able to interview on the show. And the question that we'd always get is, "Hey, Travis, how are you able to get in touch with that person? How are you able to have a conversation with them? How did you book them on your show? We've been trying to get a hold of them for 6 months and haven't heard anything back. How did you get them? Can you make an intro for us?" Whatever. And so we put out some trainings and stuff, but at the end of the day, the answer is it takes a long time. It's a really hard process to get in touch with people who are really busy. And so instead of just putting out more trainings about it, we decided to build a tool that would help people be able to skip the line and make the process happen for themselves if they really wanted to make it happen. So we got to work building Guestio. And essentially it's like Cameo, but instead of booking your favorite celebrity for a 30-second happy birthday shout out to your mom, you're buying an interview essentially with that person to use for any of your content channels. So if you want more authority in the podcast space, you go book Jordan Harbinger as a guest on your show and you advertise that you just had Jordan Harbinger on. And then in addition to that, you can actually pay Jordan to market the show for you to his audience after you pay for the interview. And then it kind of evolved into where kind of the SaaS side of it. So that's the marketplace side. You can go on there and you can buy interviews with top level influencers and stuff. And we're constantly adding to that catalog as we're continuing to grow, because we're still pretty early stage startup at the moment. And so we're just trying to continue to bring in the best talent that we can into the marketplace. So that's the marketplace side. And by the way, there you can create a free account, and there's a ton of free guests on there. So when you go through and make your settings, you can say, hey, I'll be a free guest. I'll just be interviewed on anybody's show if they want me to be on, or you can charge for your time. And there's a lot of guests on there that are totally free, that are super high quality. So if you're listening to this and you're like, well, I don't really have much of a budget, you can create a free account on Guestio and go search through all the free profiles and connect with a bunch of free people who are still going to bring massive amounts of quality to your show. So that's the marketplace side. And on the SaaS side, basically what we decided to do was like, how can we make this workflow easier for people who do this all the time? Right? People like me and you who are constantly on podcast interviews, whether we're interviewing people or being interviewed, or it's a summit or a virtual event, or it's a YouTube channel, or it's a blog, it's some form of content that requires interviewing guests. Then you can go to Guestio and use the tools that we've built to be able to manage that workflow a little bit more effectively. So you can search for them in the marketplace, click the book button, buy the interview, or do it for free, message them directly in the platform, schedule it directly within the platform. And then, you can, our pro accounts make it easier for you to stand out by customizing your profile. You can add a team member to your account to manage your schedule for you. There's some pretty cool things that we built into the back end of that to be able to do that. So, yeah, man, it's a huge project, and it's definitely was out of my wheelhouse, and I'm learning as much as I can about it, but it's exciting stuff.
So there's two sides to this. One is, you want guests, you can find guests. I mean, that was the bit that grabbed my attention first. And the reason why I like it is because, having spent 18, 20 years working with startups and entrepreneurs, as well as B2B business owners through the B2B School and the B2B Group and B2B Dash, is that there's a lot of people with a solution looking for a problem. This here was a problem, right? It's a problem, and it's a very elegant solution to a very real problem. The other bit that a lot of people underestimate is the amount of effort or back and forth that happens behind the scenes. So it's not just about me, getting in touch with Travis and saying, hey, let's do something together. There's always going to be back and forth. And we need to make sure that everybody's got the right messages, that everybody, the expectations are set. We need
the press kit, the media bio, the headshots, the social links.
Yeah. All that stuff. And there's a point where you've got to ask for it. And if you forget to ask for it, then you record the interview, then you have to go back and you have to go looking for it.
Yeah. Like, did I ask him for that on email, or was that on Facebook Messenger? Where can I find that information? Is it on Google? Yeah. All that stuff, man. Yeah. All that stuff. So there's two sides to this: the marketplace and the SaaS. And it's absolutely fantastic. I've got one more thing that I would like to say, and that is, if you're a user of podcasts and a listener of podcasts, make sure that you go listen to Build Your Network, subscribe to it. How many subscribers have you got now, Travis? Just to put you on the spot. That's a good question, bro, because podcast analytics don't tell me that.
They don't tell you that.
They don't tell me how many subscribers you have.
They used to. I think
but we get 100 something thousand downloads a month or something like that. So, we're no Entrepreneur on Fire or anything, but we do pretty well.
Way up there. And great guests. Travis has clearly got a great style. Once again, you'll have seen through the way that we did this, how personal a podcast can feel. But as well too, there is some very clear and obvious commercial advantages to doing it the right way, which is the way that Travis described. One more time, I just want to say thank you, Travis, for coming on. Wonderful to connect. Thank you so much.
Happy to be here, bro. Thanks so much for having me. This is fun.